Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 ICPSR Data Fair anchored in data reality. We're happy to have you join us today for the webinar titled North of 49, an Introduction to Canadian Data. This is our very last, the last but not least webinar for the 2024 Data Fair. So we are both excited and have lots of gratitude for the individuals joining us today. So we want to give a warm Canadian welcome to our neighbors to the north. And with that, I'm going to hand it on over to our speakers today. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. I'm Alex Cooper. I'm the Data Services Coordinator at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. I'm here presenting today with Agnes and Kevin, and I'll have each of them introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Agnes Zientarska-Kayko, and I am a liaison librarian at the University of Waterloo. I'm also government information librarian, and together with my colleague, Sandra Keys, we are responsible for data services.
And I'm Kevin Manuel. I'm the data librarian at Toronto Metropolitan University in downtown Toronto. And many of you may have seen me present at iAssist in the past, and we're glad to have you here at our presentation today. And I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement of the traditional lands that we're grateful to live on in our various communities that have represented different Indigenous peoples around our country.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll also let you know that we have three other people involved with creating this presentation, and they are, as Agnes noted, Sandra Keys from the University of Waterloo, Michael Steelworthy from Wilfrid Laurier University, and Liz Hill from Western University. The six of us all are in the province of Ontario, and we're members of the Ontario data community. Yeah, that's who we are. So I'll get started. The initial idea that I brought to Linda during the iAssist conference for this presentation was to highlight some of the unique aspects of Canadian data and statistics and where they can be found. So today, that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to give an overview of where to find data about Canada, focusing primarily on Statistics Canada, federal government departments and agencies, open government sites, and why some data in Canada is more difficult to discover and to access. So I'm going to start off very basically. Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories, and we have a population of 42 million people, the majority of which live in Ontario and Quebec. We wanted to start off with this geography to highlight the highest geographic level that the data is generally released at. Later on in this presentation, Agnes will provide a bit more detail about lower geographic levels. But when data is not available at the provincial level due to privacy reasons or whatever reasons there are, the data will sometimes be released in grouped by region. And so those regions consist of the Atlantic region, which is the 4 easternmost provinces in Canada. They include Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. And so this region accounts for 6.5% of the Canadian population. And then next we have Quebec, which is 23% of the population. Rarely is Quebec grouped with other provinces for dissemination because of its size. And likewise, Ontario, which accounts for 38.5% of the population. And then moving west, we have the 3 middle provinces, the prairies, which include Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, and they account for 18.2% of the population. And then the last province is British Columbia, the 3rd largest province by population, and it's 13.5%. Now, it's data is sometimes released for British Columbia, but if a number of times it does get grouped with the prairie provinces, and when that happens, that's the west, considered the Western region or just the West. And then finally, we have the 3 territories, which cover nearly 40% of the Canadian landmass, but they also have the smallest population, 0.3% of the total Canadian population. And the 3 territories are the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. Publicly available data for the territories is often quite limited, mostly due to the size, the small size of the population. So on to Statistics Canada. This is our national statistical agency, and they provide data, statistics, publications, reports, and visualizations to the general public, researchers, and governmental agencies. It's commonly referred to as StatCan or STC, but I'll probably end up using StatCan. In addition to the Census of Population and Census of Agriculture, StatCan collects data about and reports on the Canadian economy, society, and the environment. Key surveys include the Labor Force Survey, which is a monthly survey that produces the standard labor market indicators such as employment rate and participation rate. Participation in this survey, like the census, is actually mandatory, and respondents who are asked to fill out the labor force survey are included in a 6-month cycle. The Canadian Community Health Survey is an annual voluntary general health-related survey of Canadians, providing valuable health information and some socioeconomic information. We also have the General Social Survey, which is an annual series of voluntary cross-sectional surveys covering a wide variety of in-depth topics. These themes are repeated on a 5-year cycle and include topics such as work and home, family, caregiving and care receiving, volunteering, giving and participation, victimization and safety, and social identity and time use. It's also a very popular survey because the demographics in it and the socioeconomic information is very useful, along with those particular topics. Crime and justice data tends to be collected from policing agencies across Canada at all levels. So that's the federal, municipal, and provincial level. And business and economic data is primarily compiled through the Business Registrar, which administers 200+ business surveys and compiles business demographic indicators. I'm also going to note that provincial governments and some federal departments and agencies submit their data to StatCan, and that's where you can find that data. So they may not provide it themselves, but submit it to StatCan. In some cases, it's both. You'll get some at StatCan, some with the federal department. Statistics Canada is governed by the Statistics Act, which was introduced originally in 1901. The Act sets out what StatCan should collect and publish, what can and cannot be made public. It also sets out Canadians' responsibilities for responding to mandatory surveys like the census or the labor force survey. It also sets out a responsibility to, as much as possible, answer the voluntary surveys as accurately as possible. Once data is publicly released on the StatCan website, that falls under the Open Data License, which allows for free and open access to data and publications with proper citation. So Statistics Canada has this continuum of data access, which this image right here, which I took right from the website, it's kind of complicated and involved. There's a lot of stuff there. So I've simplified it. And basically it goes from self-serve to secure access. That can also mean free, meaning you don't have to pay anything. And the secure access, sometimes you are paying for that data. But I've simplified it down into the 4 main publicly available data types. So the first two data types are the website, which is aggregate data tables, articles, publications, visualizations, and the second one, public use microdata files. They're all available from the website, and they all fall under the StatCan open data license. So they're freely accessible. They can be used in publications, reused in publications with proper citation. The third access point is real-time remote access, RTRA, which provides limited access to the master files through the RTRA system. And in this system, researchers write SAS code and then submit it to the system. And the results are usually returned within an hour or so. And the results are generally frequency tables. There's not a lot of availability for testing or anything like that. For surveys to be included in the RTRA, the geographic levels in the surveys are generally restricted to province, and some variables have been removed. So while RTRA is providing somewhat easier access to master data files, your access can be limited if you want to do anything detailed beyond the province level. And there will be some variables that will not be included due to privacy reasons. RTRA is also a subscription-based service, which means institutions or federal government agencies pay StatCan for access to the system. But once a researcher has the outputs, that falls under the open data license. So they're able to use that data in their articles however they want with, of course, proper citation. And lastly, we have the research data centers, which is a secure enclave in select universities across Canada, and researchers are given access to the survey master data files. Researchers' output files are reviewed by Statistics Canada analysts in each of the RDCs to ensure that they fall within the privacy rules. Researchers must apply for access, and it's a bit of a long access. It can take up to 3 months. And they have to, the application also includes security clearance. And once that is all done, they become deemed employees of Statistics Canada while they're working with their data file in the RDC. Access to the RDC and the data files is governed by the Statistics Act. Now, how do we know what data is out there? How does it get released? So this is the daily, and there's more and more data publications, visualizations being released every day from StatCan. And they're released, their release is announced in the daily, which is Statistics Canada's official release bulletin. The data is released every morning, every weekday morning at 8:30 a.m. and not a minute before. And it's announced in the daily. And we can see a screenshot here from today. It shows that the employment insurance for July 2024 is one of the data tables that's been released. Now, how would you go about getting access? So to find data and statistics or whatever you're looking for, from the StatCan main webpage, you want to click on the data tab, which will take you to this image on the left, where you can do a keyword search, or you could limit your search by subject, geography, or even survey name if you know what survey you're looking for. Results are broken down by table, profile, thematic maps, public use microdata files, and data visualizations. Or you can just scroll through. You can see the very first tab is all. The image on the right is an example of a result. So going into the data, I found this table called Production and Value of Maple Products. And this is the table that's showing the production of maple products in Canada from 2019 to 2023. You are able to do a little bit of customization of StatCan tables using their Add Remove button, where you can add in additional geography if it's available, or additional categories. And the other way to find surveys from Statistics Canada website is if you know the actual name of the survey you're looking for, using this surveys and statistics page, survey and statistical programs page, which has an A to Z list of all surveys and statistical programs currently in use or currently being run. Each survey is described along with their documentation, previous names or versions, and they link to the publicly available data, statistics, and publications. And that's a very quick introduction to searching StatCan. So now I'm going to switch over or pass over to Agnes, who's going to talk about census and census geography.
No. So to continue our journey through Stats Canada surveys, we're going to look at the largest survey it conducts. So Statistics Canada mandates Stats Canada agency to conduct a national census of population and a census of agriculture every 5 years, ending in 1 and 6. So the most recent census was conducted in 2021. Like I said, census of population is the largest survey and provides a detailed statistical portrait of Canada and its people by their demographic, social, and economic characteristics at the specific point in time for communities across Canada. The data are used to develop policy programs and services. Next, please. So staying with a census of population, we're going to have a closer look at how you can get data and what you can get from this portal. So census of population data can be accessed through Statistics Canada census portal, and the search box is highlighted here on the screen. Through the portal, which contains links and products, we can access census data, find analytical articles, educational tools, and more. By typing a place name, postal code, or geographic code, we would be able to find the information related to the 2021 census here. So let's pretend that if I typed, let's say Toronto in that search box, it would give me an option to pick the specific geography. And in this case, I would pick City of Toronto, which is equal to census subdivision. And then from the drop-down menu, I would be able to access a geographic summary for Toronto City, which includes a map, key indicators, a profile table, data visualization related to the place name. It also provides links to the neighboring census subdivisions. So by just trying to find one geography, you can quickly compare it to the neighboring geographies. Next, please. Staying on the same screen, right under the search box, there are 4 quick links. And one of them is, the first one will lead us to 2021 census profile, which takes us to the census profile homepage, and we'll have a look at that in a moment, and provide census data for various levels of geography. The next to it is the button linked to census data sets going back to 1981. So all the censuses from 2021 to 1981 are can be found there. And there are 2 other links. One is Web Data Services, is a place where you can find 2021 Census Profile Web Data Service User Guide homepage, as well as GeoSearch, which is an interactive mapping application that allows us to find geographic areas in Canada for which census data is available. Next, please. Right under the quick links, we have a main menu, the navigation bar, and the links highlighted here on this slide give us access to census data, census analysis, census reference materials, as well as different topics and census questionnaires. So all this data and background information can be found easily right there. We can also easily go to census of agriculture and look at it. Next, please. Okay, so census profile. Let's have a look at the 2021 census profile mentioned before. It is the most popular data product of the census of population. And the easiest way, like I said, is by clicking in one of those quick links provided under the main search bar on the census population portal. A census profile is geographically driven, and you can search through more than 75,000 standard geographies, browse a list of all geographies by province or territory, as you can see on the screen. You can browse a map using GeoSearch or choose from popular places in Canada, and I'm upset that Kitchener-Waterloo doesn't make to the list of popular places in Canada. The profile also includes the profile includes data collected from the short form, which is 100% population answered to those questions, as well as data collected from the long form, which is 25% sample data. Worth mentioning is that the data can be suppressed for confidentiality and for data quality purposes, especially where there is not enough responses or variables to report. Also, on this page, you can find a link to related 2021 profile products like the Indigenous population profile, which may be of interest to many people, and links to profiles from previous censuses. In this case, the previous census profiles listed there are going back to 2001. And that's a very useful way of directing students who are often using the census profiles, and they can quickly move and see the data going back in years. Next, please. Okay, so next we're going to have a quick look at the census topics. As you can see, there are a variety of topics covered in census, it not only covers the variety of topics, but also various analysis, data, reference, geographical information for those topics, which are the subjects categories you would see throughout the Stats Canada pages. And those topics, they paint a portrait of Canada and its population. And if we were going to visit one of those, any of them, you can find a wealth of information, including data tables, special interest profiles, public use microdata files, infographics, reference materials, key indicators, and much more. Worth mentioning is that once you pick the topic you'd like to explore, you will see the data listed there, but you can also filter the results by data product, analytical product, and the reference material. So it can be nicely laid out to the users. Next, please. Thank you. Okay, so like census profile and census topics, census geography can also be easily accessed through the navigation bar on the census portal. Census geography covers a wide range of Canadian geographic areas, from provinces and territories down to blocks. These geographic areas have boundaries, names, and other information that make it possible to locate them on the ground and relate census data to them. Many products have information available for current and previous censuses, so you can find reference maps and boundary files going back to previous censuses and compare it. Next, please. Thank you. Okay, so this image might be a little bit daunting and complicated, and that's actually the simplified version because the original one is way too complicated. To better understand the structure of census geography, we can have a look at the hierarchy of standard geographic areas for dissemination. This image illustrates a graphical representation of the hierarchical relationship between standard geography areas used for the dissemination of the 2021 Census of Canada. And the geographic areas of Canada are defined by standard geographic classification and geographic codes. The standard geographic classification is the primary classification used at Stats Canada to classify statistical information by geographic area. And the standard geographical classification includes 4 levels: geographical regions of Canada, provinces and territories, census divisions, and census subdivisions. Statistics Canada uses several approaches to divide Canada geographically for the census. It does not use 6-digit postal code. Instead, uses census areas based either legal boundaries like census division, census subdivision, urbanization level, which is examples could be census tract or census metropolitan area, or electoral boundaries, which would be represented by federal electoral districts. Every geographic unit has a unique number, and that's how you can relate geography with the data when you are using ArcGIS, for example, which I used many, many years ago, so I don't remember anything about it. Okay, next, please. Thank you. So this is just to illustrate how on that chart we had on the screen before, we identified that we would like to find census divisions. And on the map on the right-hand side, you can see all the census divisions within Canada mapped. And census divisions are intermediate geographic areas between the province territory level and the municipality, which is census subdivision. According to Stats Canada definition, census division, CD, is a group of neighboring municipalities joined together for the purposes of regional planning and managing common services such as police or ambulance services. Census divisions are the general term for provincially legislated areas such as a county and regional district or other equivalents. Next, please. Okay. Census boundary files. So on this image, we have 2 maps, including census boundary files. And on Stats Canada portal, you can find 2 types of boundary files: cartographic and digital. Cartographic boundary files are the files representing the geographic areas using only the major landmass of Canada and its coastal islands, while digital boundary files show the full extent of geographic areas, including the coastal water area. Okay, next one. Thank you. I should mention that I'll cover in a moment that there are at least 2 ways of getting those files. And one of those ways is getting them from Stats Canada website. So this is a screenshot where you would you could download your boundary files. And the most common format would be a shapefile. And there are 3 types of geographic area boundaries available for download: administrative, statistical, and non-standard. Example of administrative would be provinces, territories, health regions, federal electoral districts. Statistical areas would be population centers, economic regions, dissemination areas. And there are some non-standard areas, which are the areas that do not match the other 2. It could include the population, agriculture, also agricultural ecumenics, if I'm pronouncing that word correctly. Okay, next one, please. Thank you. So like I said, getting the boundary files can be, the boundary files can be downloaded from Zientarska-Kayko website. However, we also have this awesome tool called Scholars GeoPortal. It provides alternate access to boundary files, which are available through that portal. GeoPortal is a tool you can use to access geospatial data sets. Some data is licensed, but many are open access, including the Stats Canada boundary files. GeoPortal includes land-based vector data, water cultural features, census geography, orthography, and more. Scholars GeoPortal is a project of the Ontario Council of University Libraries and was developed by Scholars Portal staff and launched in March 2012. So it's been around for a number of years. Next, please. Thank you. Similarly to getting boundary files, geographical boundary files from alternate place, you can also get Stats Canada data sets through an alternative place, which is called Odyssey. Odyssey is another Scholars Portal service, and it originated in Ontario by and for the Ontario Council of University Libraries, but it's now available for everyone to search. Odyssey is a web-based data exploration, extraction, and analysis tool. It lets you search for survey questions like variables across thousands of data sets held in a growing number of collections, and supports basic tabulation and analysis online. It also allows for the downloading of most data sets into statistical software for further analysis. Like I said, Odyssey provides open and enhanced access to a variety of data collections. Some of them are Statistics Canada Data Liberation Public Use Microdata, historical data sets, census data, and Canadian public opinion polls, including Gallup data, Ipsos Canada, and the Canada Opinion Research Archive, CORA. There are a lot of surveys on labor and employment, education, elections and politics, health and environment, agriculture, and more. Through Odyssey, our users can also search some of the partner collections, like the ICPSR datasets, among others. Most datasets available through Odyssey are publicly available, but some are restricted under various licenses. Data sets are hosted on Borealis, which is Canadian branding for our instance of Dataverse, but the interface was built to make it easy to use. You can use the search interface to look for surveys or a specific topic by keyword or variable, etc. But you can also browse. Next, please. So when we click on browse, okay, here's the screenshot of browsing capability and the different topics you can browse. You can browse Odyssey data by category, or like I said, search by and filter across collections using search engine. If you're browsing, you can get directly to the survey of interest from either option, browsing or searching. You'll be able to click on the data set you are interested in and go directly to the survey and then download it. In addition, there's a tool built by Scholars Portal, and it's called Data Explorer, and it is awesome. I encourage you to play with that. Okay, next, please. There are alternate ways of accessing Stats Canada data, and one of them is Abacus, a data network. It is the repository, the data repository collaboration involving some of the British universities from British Columbia. And this repository contains more than 2,100 data sets with significant collections of geospatial data, linguistics data, and survey microdata. The Abacus collection includes both open and licensed data. Open data is available to anyone, and licensed data is available only to the students, staff, and faculty of those universities who are involved with this. Data, again, is hosted on their Dataverse, and you can access the open data. You can either search using the search engine there, or you can click on open access. Can you please go to next slide? Thank you. And through there, when you can browse or search within the open data files, and either way, whether you search or browse, you have an option to use facets on the left-hand side and narrow your results. So that concludes my part, and I'll hand it off to Kaylin. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. And the next section that I'm going to speak about is data that's maybe more challenging to find when researchers are looking for particular topics, either that is about ethno-racial identity, health, or other marginalized or hard to find communities. So in this first slide, the image is showing us the first census of Canada, 1871, and it's in Niagara, Ontario. So in the sixth line, it's showing a family of African origin born in the US, and it shows that some members were also born in Ontario as well. So this is actually a fairly clear example of being able to look at the census information. But for other populations, it can be difficult. So an example of this to think about is that Canadians were British subjects until 1947. And this was also true of other British colonies as well. So what you find in some of the historical records is that there may be respondents of racialized identity, but their response of origin is based on what their passport would say is British. So it can be quite difficult to sort of extract that information from the census records. And we'll talk a bit more about that in the presentation as we go through these different topics. Next slide, please. But let's start with the Indigenous peoples of Canada. So our little image here is showing the Stats Canada page on Indigenous peoples. And currently about 5% of the Canadian population identifies as Indigenous. So that is our First Nations people, Inuit, and Métis communities. And on the StatsCan page, you can find all kinds of information that has been collected either through the census, the Aboriginal Peoples Survey, or other surveys that have been conducted. But when working with Indigenous communities, in terms of data, it's really important to think about how the terminology has changed over time. So the early colonial censuses, there was offensive and problematic terminology. But as the 20th century progressed, Native Indian was a term that was typically used until 1981. And then from 1986 to 2016, the term used was Aboriginal. And a significant change happened in our most recent census in 2021, and this is now referred to as Indigenous. So as researchers go back to look over time with particular communities, they have to consider how that terminology has changed. So I'm just going to put this into the chat here. So it is a link to a resource that Alex and I and some other colleagues created that will provide explanations about sources for Indigenous and racialized data in Canada, but also really importantly, there is a guide that instructs how these terminologies have changed since 1871 in each version of the census. So please take a look at that after our presentation. It's something that's really useful. A lot of people have included this in their LibGuides for their data pages when it comes to working with Canadian data. So some Indigenous communities don't participate within the census. The enumerators are not permitted onto their communities, their sovereign territories, and so they're conducting their own data collection, and that information is either available from those communities, or there are also some Indigenous data portals available from Canada that would provide access to those. Next slide, please. So the next topic I want to cover is about mental health, addiction, and homelessness. So in Canada, health is administered mainly by the provinces and the territories. So that services are deployed and decided, the funding is decided around the provincial and territorial jurisdictions. However, in the provinces, they are using geographies such as Ontario, which is called health regions and different things that are not necessarily matching up with census geography. So it can be a bit of a challenge to match these data up. So it's just something to consider when you're working with this area of health data. And although the provinces do share some of the health data with Stats Canada, some of it, I'll show you in further slides, is maintained by other sources. But Stats Canada does conduct some health surveys. So a really popular one is the Canadian Community Health Survey. So it's a national survey, and it's asking about people's well-being, but it's not necessarily asking questions that provinces would keep track of, like how many hospital beds are in hospitals. The other thing to consider with health data is that there is a need for confidentiality around it. So you don't want to be able to identify individuals. So this may be having to limit of the information to higher geographic regions, so that say you can't get down to a particular neighborhood in a city and to be able to say, well, I can identify this individual for these. So an example might be like this opioid awareness in Canada infographic here that shows the various provinces that have numbers related to that epidemic in the country. Another question, in particular, I get this one a lot, being in a big metropolitan city, is about homelessness. And that is an area that is very challenging, because think about the census. It is based on where you live. Now, enumerators do go to homeless shelters, but unless the individual is in that shelter at that time, the information isn't collected about that person. So what is the method to collect that information? That comes down often to municipalities or community groups. So an example in the city of Toronto, the city itself conducts a census of homelessness, and its staff will go out and work with people on the streets and try to collect information about who has a lack of housing and more information about them. So just something to consider when you're working with vulnerable populations like this. Next slide, please. The next topic I want to talk about is our LGBTQ plus communities. And so this is a great infographic here. It's showing you some information that Stats Canada has put together about gender identity and sexual identity within the Canadian population. Same-sex marriage was legalized on the federal level in 2005 in Canada, and it was first asked in the census in 2006 about same-sex marriage. So it was a small snapshot about the population, but it really didn't give an idea of where people were living in the country, how many were in particular cities and regions. So it wasn't until 2021 that a new question, and a great question, was asked. It was about gender identity. So whether people were identifying as transgender, etc. And this information is now available through Statistics Canada's resources. So a big step forward in what Stats Canada was collecting. There have been other surveys conducted in the past. You know, they weren't full population sample sizes like the census. So, you know, you can draw some inferences, but, you know, it's better to make reliable generalizations on a larger scale like the census. So I've been in some consultations with Statistics Canada, some of my other colleagues, and something that we have suggested and brought up is that sexual orientation is asked in Census 2026. There are examples of other countries that have done this, like the UK in 2021. So there's a precedent there to be able to go forward and ask a question, because if you're going to make social policy, you need to know where people are located and how to be able to make decisions about funding for those communities. So DESCAN, please include sexual orientation in the next census. So next slide, please. So I want to go back to that slide that had that information about the census from 1871 there. So when we're talking about racialized identity, racial identity, it's very different between the US and Canada. And we have a term that we've used here since 1986 that is called visible minority. Now, in a city like the city of Toronto, the visible minority population is more than half. So is it really a minority anymore? And is this term really appropriate anymore? So Statistics Canada has responded to this. So in their publications, they are now referring the visible minority as racialized now. But in the census and retroactively, it's still visible minority. We'll see what happens in the next census. There's discussions around this, but it is challenging for researchers in Canada to compare with the US because these classifications are very different here. So as you can compare those as I've listed right there. But there are organizations that are trying to collect race-based data, but what they're doing is just using visible minority terminology and just referring to it as racialized or race-based. So we'll see what happens in our census coming up in a few years. Next slide, please. So thinking about ethno-racial identity, if we go back in time in our census of Canada, it's changed quite a bit. So my colleagues, Alex and Rosa and I published an article about this in ISS Quarterly. So if you could share that with the group, please. But it gives you more detail about that guide that we created about ethno-racial and Indigenous identity. It's not a very long article, but one I think that's really worth taking some time and reading about to help understand the context in Canada. But as we can see in the early ones, it really was sort of based around nationality or origin. And it wasn't until 1901 they actually used the term race or racial origin, which was used up till the 50s. And then it shifted to origin in the 60s, ethnicity, and then visible minority in later on in the 20th century. And as I mentioned before, the census is now in its publications using the term racialized instead of visible minority. Next slide, please. Okay, now we'll move on to some open data sources. And in this slide, we're going to take a quick look at some various sources that we have here. So next slide, please. So we can take a look at our open government portal here. So this has numerous sources about government institutions, data sets, and it's a first stop for a lot of people to go into the sources and find this information. Next slide, please. And here's an example for it. So this is from our Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. One of the problems with these is they don't have a DOI on them, so sort of it can be challenging to cite this information. But it has a common look and feel across the federal websites, and it's quite easy to find this information. Next slide, please. And again, as I mentioned, the provinces and territories have jurisdiction over areas such as like health and education. So if you're going to look for more detailed information about this, these are the websites to go to. Next slide. Here's an example from a provincial one. So you're getting your CSV and Excel sheets, and they're really often talking about things like, rather than social type context, more about compliance and rules and different things that are happening that the provinces has mandates over. Next slide, please. Here's an example of a data set. So this is showing you compliance around emissions. And this one was an example from Shell Canada and Sarnia, Ontario. So some violations that had occurred there. So you can get information about that. Next slide, please. And we also have a number of non-governmental data sites as well too. Next slide. So one we call here CIHI, the Canadian Institute for Health Information. This one is where you go to for that information about how many hospital beds are there in a hospital. So it's not information that Statistics Canada collects, but this is where you can go, and the provinces have included information within these data sets for this CIHI source. So again, some data is restricted here because it is confidential, but we find researchers work directly with them and are often able to find the data that they need. Next slide. We also have the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. This works with the federal government, and it helps provide people access to insurance for higher risk loans. So if you have less than a 20% down payment, they help you get that information. So they have some information in here about housing and other sources that often many researchers are looking for if they're working with real estate type related topics. Next, please. And we also have the Bank of Canada, which is similar to the US's Federal Reserve. They share a lot of their data with Statistics Canada, but many researchers just like to go to this webpage directly to pick information about inflation, interest rates, and other sources. Next slide, please. And here's our contact info. So feel free to contact us about any of the different topics that we had provided in here. And next slide. We've reached the end, so thank you. We're happy to take any questions now. Feel free to put them into the Q&A.
There was one question in the Q&A that Agnes answered about when you would search Odyssey versus StatCan for data products. One thing that I will point out that I would send students to Odyssey for is public use microdata files. While you can access them, some of them on the StatCan website, and they're making more available, the complete collection of available public use microdata files isn't included in Odyssey. And the pumps we have in Odyssey, we have curated them quite a high rate, like really highly curated, that all the variable, each variable has question text universe notes, so that you can search in Odyssey at the variable level, which is not available from the StatCan website. And I'll just point out that that work is done by our market program, which is we've hired students to do that work. So we need to give a shout out to our students who have kept Odyssey up and running and writing in question text for a number of years. So that's one time I would go to Odyssey over StatCan. If you're looking just for a simple table or an aggregate data, StatCan is the better place, or yeah, StatCan website's the better place to start at. I'll also note that we have provided a copy of the presentation to ICPSR. So all of those websites we showed you, the links are in the presentation, which you should be able to download once you, yeah.
All right. Well, if we have a late question come in, you all can answer that. I want to thank you so much. This was great, and what a great way to end the 2024 Data Fair. Again, I learned a lot from the first slide to the last. So thanks again to our Canadian team. Just for the rest of you out there, I want to let you know that kind of ICPSR's actually the global next big event on data is International Love Data Week. And I believe it's February 10th through the 14th. More information will be coming on this page. So if you have events that you are hosting during that week, or if you're looking for events, that will be the central meeting page. And know that things are still evolving on that. So there's some new information and some old information, and the planning committee is working on that. I did see a question. Oh, and
Yeah.
so now I'm going to stop dancing and I'm going to let you read and answer the question.
So the question is, are there major data collections that are cooperating with one another? For example, the US, the American National Election Survey and the General Social Survey are sharing some respondents, which will allow some analysis of ANES response with GSS variables. Are there similar cooperations between Canadian data collections? I would say, with one exception, no. Not really. Within Statistics Canada, there are a number of different subject matters and authoring divisions, and they don't really share data between each other. The exception, I would say, and this is not really public sharing of data, is that within the research data centers, they do have administrative data, which would be like tax filer information, some health data, and a few other things that researchers can apply to use tax filer information in conjunction with another survey like the Canadian Community Health Survey or a General Social Survey. But that's only if the researcher applies, and it's only for their work. So whatever tables, whatever analysis they're doing of the combination of those two pieces of data would only be available in whatever article or book that researcher is writing. So there is sharing of data within the RDCs. It's limited, but in terms of like having it made publicly available, like a public use microdata file, or like the example, the US example you get, I don't really. That's not happening in Canada, I would say, unless Kevin or Agnes can correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's not something that's happening. Not that it's not something that's been asked for. I know researchers would be very interested in that.
Something similar that, Statistics Canada does work with other federal agencies in cross-referencing the data. So an example for this is they use Canada Revenue Agency data about taxes. So in the 2021 census, they actually dropped the income question because they found people were over-reporting their income in the census and under-reporting to the Canada Revenue Agencies. They've just decided just
Good
use the data
plan.
from what they
Yeah.
actually get from taxes. So
Yeah, and that sharing of data there for the census has actually decreased the number of questions in the long form census. So they're not asking, they're also sharing IRCC, no, not IRCC, the Citizenship and Immigration Canada, which constantly is changing its name. They share immigration information with the census. So asking questions about year of immigration and those sort of things, that information is also shared. So the question is, are you an immigrant or something along those lines? And if you say yes, then they're getting the data from Immigration Canada.
All right. And another question hasn't snuck in yet. So one last announcement from me is if you have if you're interested in receiving future announcements about data and training webinars like this, we do things in a week-long basis as we are today, as we did this week. We also do things one-offs here and there on particular training or on data sets, data themes that we have, our topical archives, for example. So if you want to be in the know when those announcements for webinars are made available, as well as the upcoming International Data Week, if you follow that link, it'll take you to a group of ICPSR opt-in emails, and you'll want to, if you sign up for ICPSR announcements, you'll be the first to know when we have those opportunities. So with that, I'm not seeing any more pings that we have more Q&A. So just would love to give our presenters a round of applause and thank you for participating today and bringing Canadian data and access into the realm of the ICPSR Data Fair. So thank you. And we will bid you all adieu now and have a great afternoon and or an evening if you're on the east side. And we're all taking Friday off. I don't know. But you see Shelley Pedrinko's face here. She is the threshold, the foundation of this entire data fair. So we're extremely grateful that she was here from the planning to the scheduling to the very last webinar. So thank you, Shelley. And again, thanks to all of you for attending. And with that, I will close this out. Take care.